Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone, and we are talking about Return of Condor Heroes 2006, the Chinese drama series. And today we're going over episodes 13 through 15, so we've gone up to 3 episodes at a time now. We're going to try to maintain that if we can. And we're also not going to talk about individual episodes, we decided. We're going to talk about just sort of what happens over the course of the episodes we watch, because really there aren't individual episodes in this program. It's not quite like when we did Babylon 5. It's a little more things happen over the course of each episode as part of the overall story. And while Babylon 5 has that to an extent, it also had sort of the individual episodes. So I think this is a better format for this particular program. So in these episodes, the big things that happen is Zhao Longnu once again leaves because she's been persuaded by Huang Rong that Yang Guo is going to suffer because the rest of the martial world will never accept him and will always look down on him, and that Yang Guo will become bored living in ancient tomb if they retreat from the world. And so he goes off looking for her. He ends up having an encounter with Huang Rong and the Wu brothers who are fighting Jin Lun, and he manages to help fend Jin Lun off a bit, and then they're finally sort of rescued by Cheng Ying, who is the cousin of Lu Shuang and one of the girls at the very start of the show from the Lu family. And except she's in a mask at this point, so we don't know exactly who it is. And he has a sort of a reunion with her and Lu Shuang, and they nurse him back to health, kind of like in almost like a cabin in the woods is the sort of arrange. I mean, I don't know exactly what the structure is, but it's a very rural situation that he ends up in, and he learns that Li Mocho is on her way to get her revenge and to get her. Her 5 poison manual back, and so they contend with her, and while they're fighting her, Huang Yaoshi arrives and helps drive her off, and this leads to a whole series of things which we'll get into. But Yang Guo and Huang Yaoshi really hit it off, really hit it off very well, and he learns some techniques from Huang Yaoshi. They have an interesting discussion. And eventually, Huang Yaoshi heads off. Also, I should say Shagu from Legend of Condor Heroes also makes an appearance at this point. And by the time Huang Yaoshi leaves, we have Shagu, Cheng Ying, and Lu Shuang together with Yang Guo. And they end up getting this idea to get a giant pair of scissors made by a smith to deal with Li Mocho's fly whisk. And they go to a blacksmith, and he just so happens to be one of the disciples of Huang Yaoshi. And Li Mocho shows up, and there's this really dramatic exchange between her and Feng Mo Feng, and we'll get into that as well. And then after at the end of that, Li Mocho leaves in embarrassment because her clothing gets burned or torn depending on how you read what was going on in the scene. And she ends up and her fly whisk, I think, got destroyed, so she ends up leaving. And I think Yang Guo kind of persuaded her that he might know the exact techniques he needs to know in order to defeat her, and so she takes off. And after this, we get a really important development where Yang Guo, and he's been sort of trying to do this a number of times, and this time he just really manages to sort of crack Shagu and get the information he's after, because she saw his father killed, and he learns that his father was killed by the poison armor on Huang Rong. And it's very interesting how this happens, but that's sort of the breakdown of it, the quick version. And so Yang Guo is enraged by this information and decides he wants to kill Huang Rong and Guo Jing, and he goes and he joins with Jin Lun. And then he who takes him to the camp of Kublai Khan, and this is where things start to get really dark. And also, this is something that I'm not so happy with this particular series, but Zhao Longnu, we get to see her venturing into a place called Passionless Valley and meeting the master of Passionless Valley, and he eventually persuades her to marry him.
So what's your problem with it? What's the difference?
The problem I have with it, and again, I could be wrong, maybe I'm misremembering things, but my memory of the book is that none of that is dealt with until Yangor gets to Passionless Valley, and it's revealed that this all happened. So it's much more of a surprise the way it's presented.
I see.
I think it's a lot more effective. Now, granted, I think anybody that was watching this program where it aired was familiar with the story, so it's not a huge thing. But I just think it works better and again, I could be wrong. Like, there's it's possible I'm just misremembering the events of the story, and something that wasn't a flashback I'm treating as a flashback, but I'm like 99% sure that when she shows up at Passionless Valley, it's a surprise. So I just feel like that's kind of an odd way to do it. But yeah, so I don't know. What did you think? Because obviously a lot happens this episode, and it's
yeah, a lot goes on. I mean, Huang Yaoshi showing up was great, and him and Yang Guo having their good friendship there for a little while was very entertaining. That was a highlight. Yeah, I was surprised at Huang Yaoshi, more surprised at him showing up than I should have been, because Chen Ying being his disciple and everything, it's like, oh, he is the natural person to show up. But I was caught off guard, and I enjoyed that. The blacksmith was Feng Mo-feng was very, very interesting. I mean, it became very clear very quickly who he. I mean, I didn't specifically know which disciple he was, but it was pretty evident early on. He knew an awful lot about every single one of the disciples for a random blacksmith. And I was disappointed we didn't get a big scissor fight. We never got the giant scissors. But other than that, that's my only criticism.
Yeah, and I think the scissors might have made more of an appearance in the book, but I could be wrong. I do think they become relevant later. I think they do. Okay. I think at Passionless Valley, they become relevant again. But yeah, it's a very so number one, we're gonna have to talk about some gaming stuff, because there's a lot of things that have to do with gaming that I think would be relevant.
Yeah, we have the leveling up, for one thing, with the Moxibustion he uses to level up.
Yeah, and the and also just sort of the coincidental meeting with the blacksmith, there's a lot here that I feel you can sort of, you can sort of make use of in gaming terms. But that scene where he meets Huang Yaoshi is the one that really sticks out in my mind. And I think it's something about how, I don't know, I love the conversation. In the book, it's a little bit more like, everybody says I'm so unorthodox, but you decided to marry your Shifu. I never thought of doing that. That's like, he's like impressed by how much Yangor is sort of pushing the limit. And it's nice in this scene, like Yangor is so proud, like not proud of himself, but he's like so defiant. Like he's like, the world is stupid and I'm going to do things my way. Like that's kind of his attitude. And you can just tell that that's really earning the respect of Huang Yaoshi. And it's interesting because Guo Jing never earned that respect in Legend of Condor. He just never. I mean, even when he sort of, like everything on Huang Yaoshi's part towards Guo Jing felt very reluctant in the end. It didn't feel like, he was really impressed with this young man. I mean,
the very first episode of this series highlights that, where he's Guo Jing, when Huang Yaoshi shows up, it's like he hears he's around. It's like, oh, I don't want to see him, and that's the reason he leaves. He's like, forget it, I don't want to talk to that guy.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it was a really, I mean, it's a good scene too, because it gave Yang Guo just, I think, it's the affirmation he needed, and in the fact that he has been doing his own thing the whole time, and it's not like it necessarily changed anything he did, but it was nice for him to have someone who saw that as a virtue rather than him just being difficult.
Yeah, no, I thought it was, and he was kind of using it to take jibes at Guo Jing, and so it was, I don't know, it was just a funny exchange, and and I think Huang Yaoshi really shines as a character in this sequence. Also, Shagu, I thought the characterization of Shagu here really reminds me a lot of the Shagu from Brave Archer. And so I thought that was, I don't know, she's just like and it's funny too because she's like supposed to be 40 at this point, but she's still behaving like like Shagu from the first book.
Yeah, she's the one character who just doesn't change. But I'd forgotten the character's name, but I had absolutely no issue remembering the character just because it is basically the exact same characterization as Brave Archer.
And I guess the crucial scene is when so every time Shagu sees Yanguo, she thinks he's Yang Kong, and she thinks he's a ghost. She says, oh, a ghost, it's the ghost of Yang Kong, and she thinks he wants revenge, and so he starts using that to his advantage, and I think he does it like 3 times, and on the 3rd time he really pushes her to like the breaking point, and it's I don't know, it's the way she describes. Like she says, I saw. Like he asks, how did I die? And she says, your body was eaten by crows. And just like you can just tell how he's affected by the imagery of his father being eaten by crows. And then she says, Gugu did it. And again, this is one of those things where Gugu becomes this. It's very interesting how Gugu gets used over the course of the story, and he eventually is able to whittle it down in a very interesting way. By just sort of the process of elimination, who did Gugu is on Peach Blossom Island with Uncle and Grandpa, and she's like, oh, and then he's like, oh, what does Gugu call Grandpa? And then when she says father, it starts to all fall into place, and then he finally figures it out, and then he's just determined to go get revenge. And this is, again, I don't know, what did you think of that turn? Did you feel that it was abrupt? Did you feel it made sense?
It was very abrupt. I mean, it is a huge turn. So, I mean, it's the kind of thing I'm going to have to see how it plays out because, I mean, he's still his own character. I mean, when we get to Kublai Khan and stuff, it's not like he's changed sides or anything. He's still like, oh, I didn't come to join you guys. I'm here doing my own thing. So, it's not like his character changed, but it's the kind of thing I have to reserve judgment on until we get to a scene where he's actually with Huang Rong again. It's like what happens then is what's going to make me decide because I kind of get where he is in his head now. It's just about what he's going to do with this. So I don't really have an opinion yet, basically.
And he is helping Junlun become the Jinlun become the leader of the Wulin. That's sort of the exchange they made. So he's not working with the Mongols, but he might as well be like in the book it makes very clear, very crystal clear what's going on here, because as he's going to the scene where he meets Jinlun, he actually sees a bunch of atrocities being committed by the Mongol soldiers as they invade Song territory. And one of those atrocities is a screaming baby on the end of a spear. So I mean, it's as heavy-handed as it gets. And I feel like some of that was absent here. You didn't quite get the sense of like the writer is basically saying like, Yangor, you are this is like a catastrophically wrong decision. You're going down the path of your father.
It's true, because I'll agree with you. It's like if I didn't have anything to go on other than the show, if I didn't know anything about Mongols for some reason, it's like, you haven't gotten that clear a picture that Mongols are really, really kind of terrifying things to have invading you. But
well, and in the book, it's like even more. It's obviously from a certain point of view, so like it's even more. It's even more stark. It's very starkly painted, and so I feel like the what's going on here is, again, Yango is very visibly making a choice that is not just going to have consequences for him and Huang Rong and Guo Jing, but consequences for like other people. And to an extent, everybody's making that choice in this, because again, you look at a character like Li Mocho. She's a powerhouse, and she's not turning any of that against this invading army that's like they're all sort of bickering and fighting with each other, all these martial heroes, and there's like an invasion going on. So it's
pretty fascinating, and I mean but yeah, I don't know. Getting back to the question of Yang Guo and his turn. I mean, I guess it's inevitable that the series had to go in this direction at some point, because so much is made of will he will he go down a dark path or not, and so for him never to go down a dark path a little bit would almost be anticlimactic. So I feel like the story had to go this way at some point.
Well, and also with the one thing to keep in mind, Yango does not know how bad his father was at this point.
Yeah.
Like every time he asks somebody about his father, they'll like Huang Yaoshi was like, best not to talk about the past. And and
I was surprised when Huang Yaoshi did, because at first I was like, oh, Huang Yaoshi's someone who just might put it all out on the table. But no, because I mean, that's another interesting thing of the Huang Yaoshi thing is it's like he's not just unorthodox for unorthodox sake, because he has his own thing. It's like, with the becoming brothers thing, it's like he's like, no, that's unacceptable. It's like
he gets mad. He throws a jug into the water when Yango suggests that they become sworn brothers, and there's the age difference. So
it's like some things do matter to him. It's just that it's not that he's unorthodox for unorthodox sake as much as it's just things he cares about and things he doesn't.
And and he does ask Yango to become a student. In the book, what happens is Yango does not, and what they agree on is he says, well, you can be my student when you're contending with Li Mocho. So he teaches them the two techniques.
I wondered how that went.
Yeah,
it kind of goes back and forth. It's like, wait, why is he teaching him now? And I didn't mind, but I was just wondering what the rationale was.
Yeah, there is an explanation. They sort of get a technicality where he's like, well, when you're fighting her, you're my student. And there's this whole sequence. So Li Mocho leaves because she's sort of defeated by Huang Yaoshi, and then she starts spreading these notes around that say. Let me see if I can find the quote, because it's pretty specific what she says, and I don't want.
Yeah, 5-on-1, and he's the laughing stock of the martial. Huang Yaoshi is the laughing stock of the martial world off the top of my head, which isn't the exact wording, but.
Yeah, it says Huang Yaoshi has many disciples, 5 against 1. He's the laughing stock of the martial world, and that's pretty much what it says in the book too. And she puts this, like, you encounter this phrase a lot, and it's the phrase that eventually kind of gets on the nerves of Feng Mo Feng. But it's just so funny, sort of that tactic, because she just can't accept that she was defeated by Huang Yaoshi, and so. It's she and it's interesting. What I love about Li Mocho in these scenes is so she won't accept that, like she's heard all these stories of these great figures from the past, but she sort of put her own spin on that saying that they're not so great after all. So and Huang Yaoshi is one of the people that's in that mix, 'cause she just doesn't seem to be able to accept that other people are better than her at this point, and I like that she's sort of pestering him with this slander. Though I guess in a sense it's maybe technically true. I don't know, but then when they get to the scene with Feng Mo Feng, which I think is the best, it's probably the best scene in the book in my opinion. It's one of the best scenes in the book, because Feng Mo Feng is this blacksmith who was a disciple of Huang Yaoshi, and when he's there, sort of working on the scissors for Yango and all them, Li Mocho arrives. And she again starts, saying that thing about, being the laughing stock of the martial world, and then he says, well, he has many disciples, and he starts just very dramatically going through each of the disciples, and so he talks about Bronze Corpse, and she's like, oh, Bronze Corpse, he was killed by a child, don't tell me about Bronze, and it's true, he was, we know that from the last story, and then he's like, Iron Corpse has incredible is incredibly fast and deadly, and she says, oh well, she was blinded by the seven freaks, and then she was I forget what she said.
Her organs are shattered by Ouyang Feng.
Yeah. Which again, Ouyang Feng is nobody to sneeze at. So she she's really kind of minimizing the opponent that was being faced there.
Yeah, it's not being killed by a child. That's for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, and so
I heard that child she's referring to being Ko Jing. But
yeah, exactly. And really, Li Mocho isn't that different from Mei Chao Feng. She's from Iron Corp. She's pretty she's kind of occupying similar territory in the story. And he continues to go on so he goes on to Chu Ling Feng, who I think is Shagu's father. I could be wrong. I think that's her father. And she's like, he tried to steal imperial treasure and was killed by the guards. It just
once again too, it's like, wow, he couldn't even get into the imperial palace.
Yeah.
They're all none of these slights are that great when you dissect them.
And it's just she's just so so then eventually they have to contend with each other because he reveals that he was one of the disciples, and he fights with a crutch because his legs are broken and a hammer, and he heats them up in the forge before he fights. And so I don't think the show captures the drama and the energy that the book has when you have this guy with a burning crutch and a burning hammer just it's going against Li Mocho. It's one of the most crazy scenes in the book, and it's and so I think they kind of do it here, I think, the same way, but I think in the book his hammer or his crutch burn her robes. And because she's exposed, it's like, like you can see her shoulder and her back, and that's like too much for her. And Yango ends up throwing him one of his own robes. And again, it's it goes back to her whole thing where she's this terrible sort of like demon in the martial realm that just murders people, but she has like modesty. Do you know what I mean? She's got these things that really matter to her. And then Yango, because he's just learned Divine Finger Flick and Jade Flute, he goes up and says, "Well, I'm a disciple of him now, and you better watch out because it'll just, all I have to do is use Jade Flute, and you're toast." And in the book, what is that he's not ready to take her yet.
He's bluffing.
Yeah, well, yeah, because Huang Yaoshi basically says, in I forget what time frame, but he says in 5 years you'll be able to take her no problem, but you're gonna have to train her.
Okay.
And so he's not ready to take her on, and he's just using words to sort of cow her, and it works. She ends up departing.
Yeah, that makes more sense. In the show, I was like, wow, it's not a very young girl kind of approach to go, well, talking is easier than doing. I mean, that isn't. Yeah. It seemed like I was wondering why. It would have been easy for the show to throw in that one more line, so they probably should have done that.
Well, there's a couple of things going on too, because not only she was embarrassed by the burning of the robes, but then the person who helped her was Yangor because he gave her his outer coat, and so I think she was also feeling a sense of. I don't think it was explicitly said, but I feel like there was a sense of reciprocation on her part for him, treating her like a member of her sect. Because I think he specifically, I could be wrong, but I think he mentions them being part of the same sect when he hands her the robe. And if he doesn't say it, it's at least something you're aware of.
Speaking of her justifications for losing and things, it's like after she fights, what is it? It's after she fights the blacksmith. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name.
No, that's
okay. But she's like, I've heard these great things about the disciples of Wang Yoshi, but you're not fighting properly. It's like, yeah, it's like who would think Eastern Heretic would use such unorthodox
Yeah.
techniques?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely.
So, what were you expecting here?
And the and again, we do get the Passionless Valley stuff. I don't know. I'm curious. What were your thoughts on the Passionless Valley things? Because we see Zhao Longnu sort of. She basically. I think if I recall from the book, her longing for Yangor disrupted her inner her her meridians when she was training or something, and she got injured.
I see.
I suppose she might have been pricked by one of the flowers in the valley, but I don't think that's what happened. I think it was training, and she was thinking of Yangor, and she had some kind of internal problem. But then the master of Passionless Valley, Gong Sun, shows up, an older gentleman with a sort of a bunch of retainers, and he obviously is sort of a man of in a position of authority. He arrives, and he nurses her back to health, and then he convinces her that in Passionless Valley you can abandon love, and that's the source of your pain. So it's kind of like it's almost like a weird form of Buddhism. It's like so he basically he's trying to persuade her that he's basically presenting himself as somebody who's trying to cure her of this affliction which is causing her pain, and saying, oh, you just have to get rid of the love. And then when it's not working, he says, well, why don't we try I'm a healer. Why don't we try, you marrying somebody else, and then you won't be longing for this love that you can't have, and so let's get married. and I don't remember if they quite settle on anything in the series, but
They do,
they
yeah.
do.
At the end of this, her angle on it that she takes in response is that, oh, well, if I marry someone, I won't be available anymore, and he'll get over it because he'll have to move on with his life. So
Okay.
it's like, I don't think he sold her on the idea that getting married is going to heal her pain. It just sold her on the idea that, making herself unavailable will give Yang Guo a chance to move on with his life.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of, she at the end of the episode says she's gonna head off and leave the valley and go look for someone to marry, and that's where it leaves us off.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll pick up on that thread when we return there. What did you think of
Yeah.
the Kublai Khan stuff and him going to the Mongolian camp and all that?
Oh, that's interesting stuff. I mean, it's all set up at this point. Nothing has quite happened, but it's yeah, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see where it's all going to go.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know when they. I mean, I'm assuming they get back to it in the next episode. But once that gets interesting. I'll say that gets very interesting. I think there's some memorable stuff coming up. But yeah, so the only other thing that I did want to note, because I was noticing there's a lot of shots in this series of the rivers and lakes as they're traveling on horse, and so rivers and lake region is sort of the genre. So I thought that was kind of notable. But what else did we get? Did we get anything else? I think we covered all the big details.
yeah.
So I don't know, but in terms of gaming content and things like that, did anything sort of leap out at you as usable? I don't mean to put. If nothing did, don't worry, because I don't want to.
No. I'm not feeling put on the spot. I'm just trying to think because yeah, I hadn't considered that question yet at this point. Well, obviously, like I said earlier, there's the whole mock Sebastian scene where we actually have a level up, which is he tells him, oh, your power level's increased now, and all that kind of thing. So that it's an interesting way to approach a character leveling up to an extent, in a very literal sense. But I don't know, what do you see in the episode?
So the thing that the scene that I had in mind is the scene with Feng Mo Feng, where all they do is something that players do all the time. I want to go to a blacksmith and have this special thing made to solve this problem, right? Which, I mean, you've seen players do that. They might not come up with the scissor idea, but I've seen a lot of really weird concepts being brought to blacksmiths. And I have this idea that I've tweaked a lot since I originally introduced it, but the idea of the fated encounter, because clearly this is like, it's really coincidental that they're just happening to bump into the masters, the disciple of Master Huang Yaoshi, who they were just with, and one of them is a disciple of, and and it just all sort of perfectly comes together. I like the idea that whether you randomize it, if you have a world where fate is a real thing, that random encounters can sometimes be more than just random encounters and have sort of a degree of fate involved. And you can arrive at that randomly, like, okay, X percentage of encounters are fated encounters, or just when it seems appropriate. Hey, they're going to a blacksmith. Let's make this a fated encounter. I don't really care as much about the specifics of how it gets there. But what you do is you take the idea, blacksmith. Okay, how can I make this blacksmith relevant to them through the lens of fate? As like how would and for it to be a fated encounter, I think it has to have some greater significance to the players. Like, they're not just meeting the blacksmith, they're meeting somebody who's relevant to something they're doing, or a part of their past, or a part of their organization. Somebody who knows somebody that they know, or is a lost, forgotten family member, or whatever, just that kind of a thing. And I think one thing that watching a lot of wuxia, especially the television series and reading the books, because you see it more often in them, is one thing that's done for me is it's made me a lot more comfortable with just kind of going with that sort of stuff in an encounter. Do you know what I mean? And not feeling like I don't know, that it has to be because if you insert fate, it creates almost like a lower bar for plausibility, because fate can justify a lot of stuff, and it's still an in-setting justification, which is what I like.
One of the classic things people have grappled with in D&D going back decades is the shopping scene. It's like, oh, the party wants to go shopping, and one guy's buying stuff and going through the equipment list, and everyone else is bored, and it's like, okay, we spent 30 minutes at the beginning of the session shopping, and here it's like this is a shopping scene. We're going to go buy something to fight Li Mochu, and not only does the blacksmith become this important, iconic figure in their background, also Li Mochu shows up during the shopping scene. So it's a way of taking, which is this really perfunctory scene that you do go through to get to the interesting scene, and it makes it the interesting scene. So it's interesting on a couple of levels there.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a really great point, because I think everybody has that. You go, the players go and they do the shopping, or they do whatever, any kind of micromanagement type, activity that is just sort of part of a regular game. And most of the time you don't need to do anything with that. It's totally fine. But it is kind of nice to have this as sort of an ace up your sleeve that you can drop every once in a while as a way to make it more interesting. Now, I mean, obviously, I think you have to be cautious, but in this scene, it made sense, because obviously, so what we don't realize is Li Mochu was, how she goes away, and then Huang Yaoshi leaves because he thinks she's gone. She wasn't really gone. She was pretending to be gone because she wanted Huang Yaoshi to go away so that she could kill them. So it actually, it's in everything. Her showing up there wasn't coincidental. But
that's not weird.
But again, you can really spice up a scene with something like. I mean, and again, it was also interesting because really the party in this scene wasn't involved in the battle, though they became. I mean, they were part of it, but they weren't like involved in the actual combat. Do you know what I mean? Not to the extent that Feng Mo Feng was. And so you also don't have. It doesn't have to just become a melee. It can become a situation that's very complicated and a really interesting role playing opportunity.
Well, ultimately it is. I mean, if we look at the five character, not the five there, if you look at the various disciples of Huang Yaoshi that are there and stuff, it's as being the party and the blacksmith being the NPC. I mean, the NPC does the fight, but ultimately, Yang Guo is the one that talks her away. He's the one that resolves the situation ultimately. So ultimately, a player had to step in and role play out a scene with her to get her to leave. So it wasn't like the party was on just on the sidelines, and this thing played itself out with them watching and doing nothing. So.
And it's also an example of how bad guys don't always have to fight until they die. They can, I mean, again, I think most people, pick up on this lesson, but it's an easy lesson to forget, and it's an easy lesson to just not ever encounter.
Yeah.
And she's a great example of that, because she's constantly sort of fighting and then departing, and I think that's and she's even and she's powerful enough that she's certainly somebody that they're happy she's departed. They're not eager to chase her down and do her in. It's just it's more like the odds are just not in her favor enough, so she leaves in most of these cases, except for the Huang Yaoshi situation, probably. But,
I'm going to call out, not by name but anonymously, because you know who you are if you're listening. But just a game designer who worked on a Hong Kong movie type game at one point was running ideas by me, and I'm like, yeah, there should be an ability where you can leave a fight quickly, where you can just get out of one. And he was just adamant that nobody would ever want to leave a fight in this genre. And I'm like, it happens so much. And so I feel this justifies my point. But
well, there is a rebuttal, I think, that we're watching a mainland series, but
yeah, but it happens a lot in the Hong Kong.
I agree with you. I agree with
you. That's what I'm saying.
I'm playing on the frame war in my head over the.
Yeah, no, that is a rebuttal, but I can come up with many counter examples to counter the rebuttal. So,
but yeah, I think again. And I do think if you're going to try to model this in a game, it would make sense to have an ability that makes it easier to get away, whatever it is. Because
my character in your campaign has his retreat ability, so so you've got that covered. So,
but yeah, so anyways, I don't know. Is there anything else that we want to go over? I don't remember if we missed anything, but
yeah. I think I've covered it.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right, so I'm gonna end it there, because I have people don't know this, but my heater was out all weekend, and it just went back on, and so I have things that I have to tend to now. But I'm gonna be back on tomorrow with Wuxia Workshop, and I'll be back on Friday. Adam will be joining us as well, I believe. I don't want to jump the gun on that, but I believe we'll have the full house with us for House of Flying Daggers, and then I'm sure we got other stuff coming up too. So we'll be back on, and also we have a new name for the show on Fridays. We always do these wuxia film discussions, and so I've sort of thrown around a bunch of different names, and we finally settled on Wuxia Weekend, and we even got a logo for it now. So it's official, even though we've been doing it for forever. So we'll be back on, and we will talk to you later.